Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we continue our Fantasy Files series with a look at, hey, let's find some freaking alpha target hogs today, people. I know in fantasy, I've been ramming this kind of point home over the past, we've been over here a year now, over the past year, we can use that diction there. Over the past year, I've been ramming in the fact that we want to chase volume in fantasy football. Now, I understand that's not necessarily the only thing to look for. We still want to look at players as well, but we just see time and time again, volume does win out in situations where it's extreme. Like we just don't see running backs getting 300 plus touches and busting, maybe relative to their ADP, but we still see them, coming through as an RB1, RB2 at worst. And the same thing is true at wide receiver. And, I'll just use all these numbers are fairly arbitrary in our line of business, but we'll say 150, magic number, 150 targets. Since 2010, we've had 65 wide receivers get at least 150 targets in a season. Their average finish has been as the PPR wide receiver 6, 59 to 65, which is 91% finish as top 12 wide receivers. The only three of this group, again, 65 wide receivers, only three of them failed to finish as the top 24 PPR wide receiver. 2012 Larry Fitzgerald, 2016 DeAndre Hopkins, and 2016 Allen Robinson. And we can thank the likes of John Skelton, Kevin Kolb, Ryan Lindley, Brian Hoyer, Brock Osweiler, Tom Savage, and even Blake Bortles for that. So there is an exception here and there. Generally, though, if we can find someone that's getting the overwhelming majority of their passing game volume, they're going to be putting up big numbers. So with that in mind, I wanted to look at who can we maybe expect to not necessarily join this club, but like who should be in a position to maybe post similarly really high target totals because they're the undisputed target hog of their offense. So going to PFF's fantasy football projections for this, and the first thing to note, the 150 number, it's so high, like you just can't really project guys for that amount. It's why we see, passing touchdown totals for PFF's quarterbacks, in the low 30s or the high 20s. And when we think maybe they can get 40, maybe they can, but that's in the upper end of their outcomes. Median projections aren't necessarily there to, go out on a limb for guys who want to more or less kind of set their median range of outcomes, what we can expect to happen more times than not out of 100. So with that in mind, the only guys projected to clear even 140 targets are Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, and Calvin Ridley. Don't think there's any disagreements there, but basically, instead of just lining up and telling you guys, hey, here are the best, top 10 ranked players in PFF's projections for total targets, I wanted to go a step further and try to see who are the guys projected for a ton of targets and also aren't in an offense with someone else that's necessarily going to be seeing a ton of, targets themselves, because we do have more and more offenses these days. Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Tyler Lockett, and DK Metcalf. Like a lot of teams have, they're basically Batman and Batman. That was a good quote my buddy Andrew Erickson, you can find on the Wednesday edition of this podcast every week, noted about A.J. Brown, Julio Jones. So situations and offenses like those, hey, we could still see two guys get over 150 targets potentially, but we just don't have the same sort of ridiculous floor afforded to a team's undisputed number one pass game option. So with that in mind, I took our PFF fantasy projections. I looked at target share, just players' projected targets divided by their team's total pass game opportunities. I looked at who has a target share of at least 20%. That's telling us that, okay, if we're getting 500 total pass attempts in this offense, this guy's going to have at least over 100 targets. If we can get the 600-700 range, we're talking about a guy that is now pushing for, 130, 140 targets, if not more. And the second part of this question is key. The number 2 option in their passing game has to have a target share under 5% or with 5% less than the guy that is number 1. So with that in mind, we have 12 qualified pass game options, and several of these guys aren't going to surprise you. But with that said, I'll list these guys. And again, I'm ranking them by the percentage difference between them and their number 2 pass game option. So number 1, Devontae Adams, no doubt about it. 28% projected target share, 15% above Allen Lazard. Only 2 guys had at least 10% over their number 2 pass game option. Number 2, Arizona Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, 28% target share, like Adams, 13% ahead of Christian Kirk. Number 3, another guy that we've just seen rack up 150 targets with regularity over the years, Chicago Bears wide receiver Allen Robinson, 24.5% target share, 8.5% above Darnell Mooney. More and more help is being afforded to Robinson, Montgomery, Mooney, all these guys with news that Tariq Cohen, his recovery from the ACL tear is not going quite as smooth as some anticipated. Number 4, New Orleans Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas, 24% target share, 8% above Alvin Kamara. When the PFF fine social media folks came out with just 4 wide receivers that I'm way far ahead of consensus on, Michael Thomas joined Deontay Johnson, Devontae Smith, and there was one more. Yeah, Odell Beckham as my top 4 wide receivers in that rate. And again, just about that volume, because for him to really have a real opportunity to have a target total starting with a 2 by the end of the season, I still think it's going a little bit overlooked. Wide receiver 10 consensus, Michael Thomas. He is my wide receiver 6. Number 5 is actually not a wide receiver. He should call himself a wide receiver so he can make more money. But it's Las Vegas Raiders tight end Darren Waller, 24% target share, 8% above John Brown, who we have projected for the second most. It's anyone's guess in Oakland. And I think, if you look closer at the numbers, it's not necessarily stating that John Brown is the overwhelming favorite to be the wide receiver 1. But between him, Henry Ruggs, Bryan Edwards, we got to see what's what. Gun to my head, I do think Edwards is the best value of the group. But John Brown, if he's healthiest, particularly, it wouldn't be the craziest thing to see him actually replace Nelson Aguilar as the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. Number 6, we have Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Calvin Ridley, 25% target share, 7.5 percentage points above Kyle Pitts. Yeah, Ridley, top 5 wide receiver in fantasy land. We get that. He is my wide receiver 5. Number 7, we have Washington football team wide receiver Terry McLaurin with a 23% target share, 7% above Logan Thomas. Curtis Samuel's going to get his. We got Diami Brown, Adam Humphries, and all that. But Terry McLaurin, people, like this, his upside is just out of this world in terms of what he could do with Ryan Fitzpatrick under center. I've thrown this stat around a few times on the podcast, but the times we have seen Fitzpatrick just get a legit chance to play under center, his wide receiver 1s have benefited more than just about anyone. Overall, we've had 8 seasons where Fitzpatrick has started at least 10 games. His number 1 wide receiver has posted target totals of 128, 134, 137, 141, 146, 148, even 173 to old man Brandon Marshall in one of those Jets years. So if Terry McLaurin gets 130 plus targets, look out, because, with what he's shown already with bad quarterbacks under center, volume meeting an improvement upgrade at quarterback, look out, people. Now for our final 5, we got a couple more layups, but this is our kind of biggest takeaway here is Brandin Cooks, Houston Texans, wide receiver 1, 21% target share, 6% projected above Randall Cobb. Now here's the thing with Brandin Cooks. I think we've talked about on one of these podcasts already, but he has had basically the inverse of Allen Robinson, Andre Johnson, even Terry McLaurin's early career in terms of quarterbacks. He's gotten to play with Drew Brees, Tom Brady, the 2018 version of Jared Goff, and Deshaun Watson. Unfortunately, the 2019 version of Jared Goff was the only time we've seen him really falter in recent years. I mean, he's ripped off PPR wide receiver 14, wide receiver 10, wide receiver 15, wide receiver 13, wide receiver 17, and unfortunately, wide receiver 61 finishes since 2015. So one of the big knocks on Cooks is he almost carries this like injury-prone idea around him because he has, had a scary concussion history. With that said, people, he has appeared in 15 games for all but 2 of his 7 career seasons. And it's just one of these things where, yeah, it'd be scary if Cooks got a concussion, but anyone could get a concussion. It'd be scary. Seems like it's counted more against him than other guys, perhaps unnecessarily so. But generally, people, I mean, Cooks is going off the board with an ADP as a wide receiver 45 right now. I mean, I'm not saying you need to go draft him in the top 20, but in that spot in the 7th or 8th round of these drafts, I mean, particularly, I think as we continue to see the running back value open up more and more in the middle rounds, if you find yourself in round 8, you've already taken, we'll say, 1 quarterback, 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers. You could do a hell of a lot worse than Brandin Cooks as your wide receiver 3 or 4, hell, even 5 by that point in the draft. So I think Brandin Cooks is a perfect example of a player we can buy closer to his floor than his ceiling. I know the quarterback situation is not looking good, but we also don't know how long Deshaun Watson's going to be gone. I mean, it's not necessarily a given that this dude's going to miss all 16 games. And even if he is gone for a good portion of the season, I mean, Tyrod Taylor isn't exactly incompetent at feeding someone the ball. I know it's not the best case scenario, but when you combine, whether it's Tyrod Taylor, Davis Mills, even Jeff Driscoll, we at least have quarterbacks that seemingly can put up some level of yards in one of the most empty offenses in the league in terms of actual target competition. So Brandin Cooks is someone where, like, yeah, it's risky to rank him as the wide receiver 2 he's always been because of this. And no, I wouldn't recommend drafting him as a wide receiver 2. You don't have to. You can take the guy as a low-end wide receiver 3. Dude's going to beat his ADP for what seems like the 90th time in the last 91 seasons. At number 9 on this list, we got Buffalo Bills wide receiver Stefon Diggs, 24% target share, 6% above Cole Beasley. No, I don't think there's any disagreements here. Stefon Diggs consensus, top 5 receiver. We got the LA Chargers, Keenan Allen, 22% target share, 5.5 percentage points above Mike Williams. I mean, Keenan, he's right there with Deontay Johnson, where his target total was already impressive enough last year. But if you go in, you take out that Saints game where he got hurt, he caught a touchdown early on, but he only played like 16 snaps or something. And I believe his last game of the year, he had another game where it was out. So that's the one thing, with these, I agree, like per game stats in general are better than season-long fantasy finishes because we just see, guys with excess volume really rise to the top, but not necessarily be as productive as their final finish might indicate. With that said, though, I think looking at, Keenan and having those examples, the Baker Mayfield weather games, looking at, the Kendall Hinton game and what that did to all the Denver Broncos pass game options, there's no perfect one-all, be-all statistic in fantasy football and really any sort of sport. So that's why we need to do our best to adjust these, look at each situation with its own lens and move on. So, Keenan really has a chance. I mean, if he has wide receiver 1 overall, upside in his range of outcomes, if we can get 17 healthy games out of him with the same Justin Herbert that we saw, maybe not tear up the league, but look pretty damn good against it in 2020. Last 2 are actually going to be tight ends. And again, people, the criteria, at least 20% target share and at least 5% target share above their team's number 2 pass game option. We have Detroit Lions tight end T.J. Hockenson with a 20% target share, 5.5 percentage of points above Tyrell Williams. And also Mark Andrews from the Ravens, 22% target share, 5% above Marquise Brown. So with Andrews, I think last year disappointed me because I know Lamar's regression as a passer didn't help Andrews, but we did not see Andrews, in my opinion, look like the same guy. And the main part of that was the yak ability. I mean, he looked like not necessarily Kittle as a rookie and sophomore, but he made really good things happen with the ball in his hands after the catch. I mean, in 2018, he averaged 5.8 yards after the catch per reception. 2019, 4.5. Last year shrunk all the way at 3.2, even though we didn't see like any sort of a major difference in average target depth. So, hey, guys scored 17 times over the past 2 years. I'm a big fan of rewarding guys more for touchdowns than yards. You need points to win games after all, but it was still, career low marks in yards per catch, yards per target. I think Andrews could benefit from having Bateman, having other guys to help open up the middle of the field for him. With that said, I'd be more excited about, his status on this list if it wasn't for multiple new people with Bateman and Watkins, and also just his status as still being maybe the number 1 pass game option in the league's single most run-heavy offense. So Mark Andrews, going where he is, I don't think anyone disagrees with it. I just haven't gotten many shares of him so far as, the tight end 5 that he's going as over at Underdog Fantasy because, I'm taking baller wide receivers or running backs in that range. I don't think the difference between Andrews and, some of the lower end tight end 1s is as huge as the high end tight end 1s and Mark Andrews. So that middle range of tight ends for a second straight year, I will largely be fading with the possible exception of one T.J. Hockenson. I mean, this dude just had one of the better years. I think that's flown under the radar at the position in recent memory. He finished last year as the overall PPR tight end 5, but he missed a tight end 3 finish by an entire 1.4 PPR points. So, we're talking about a 5-yard catch, extra 5-yard catch away from being the tight end 3. And I know we can make that argument about a lot of guys. Just realize Hockenson had himself a very good season last year. So even with Jared Goff under center, like you can say, okay, he's worse than Matthew Stafford. Maybe we'll see the efficiency decline a little bit. But finally, we can see Hockenson get the sort of target total he deserves with Golladay, with Marvin Jones, with Danny Amendola all out of the picture. And perhaps, maybe see some extra scores because there's not those guys to throw to. And maybe, just maybe, we don't get the worst version of Jared Goff. I mean, it seems like for as much credit as we're giving Sam Darnold, Carson Wentz of, turning their careers around potentially, Goff gets no respect with what he could maybe do in Detroit. I get the reasons why, he's not playing under Sean McVay. He's not playing under Joe Brady. And the pass game weapons and O-line alike are significantly worse in Detroit compared to LA and Carolina. Carolina. But at a minimum, people, could we at least maybe live in a world where Jared Goff enables Hockenson to a big year? Because those last 5 games of 2019, Goff sure made Tyler Higbee look like a damn superstar. And out of all the knocks we have on Jared Goff, can he operate off script? Not really. Is he someone that, has just been horrendous at times? Absolutely. For as much grief as we give him, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Brandin Cooks for at least 1 year, Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett when they've actually not been canceling each other out. Goff has consistently, enabled many relevant pass game option. That's why Tyrell Williams and, Brashad Perryman and even Amon-Ra St. Brown are getting some love in, deeper fantasy circles. And it's why T.J. Hockenson is my tight end 4, even though he's going as, PFF's consensus tight end 5, underdog tight end 6. Like, we have a guy with higher draft capital at the position than just about anybody other than Kyle Pitts. He's proven the ability literally last year to be a top 5 player at the position. And now we're seeing that guy get more targets than we ever even thought were going to be on the table for this. So TJ Hockenson and Brandin Cooks are my 2 big takeaways from the study as guys that are underpriced relative to their potential ceiling. We could see with these targets. Like, Hockenson has the talent and the volume to crack the top 3, and it really shouldn't surprise us. I'm not saying he should be ranked ahead of Kittle, Waller, or Kelsey, but it wouldn't be this crazy thing that happens if he finishes the season like that. Like, you can't tell me that that's just impossible. I could definitely see it happening. And when you just want to play the game of who's going to lead the tight end position and targets, even though I think Waller, who was on this list, will lead the way, Kelsey's going to be there, Hockenson also has a chance to knock on that door of leading the entire way. So people, Brandin Cooks, TJ Hockenson, both guys I think are more than worthy of investment fantasy leagues of all shapes and sizes. That's going to do it. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. New episodes every single day throughout the summer. Just finished moving on Friday, everybody. So I'm going to be in this, basement setup, living in the mom's basement for a week or 2 before I get through and get fully moved up to Cincy. But it's a good time. It's all good, get the home cooked meals and everything going on there. But yeah, yesterday, my goodness, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., got the U-Haul, packed that thing up, got in. I will say I got so lucky. This was the easiest move of my life because I have a first floor apartment, and the balcony, or patio, whatever the hell you want to call it, looked out directly to where the street is. And I was able to literally just take all my boxes, take about 12 steps, put them on my balcony, later go in the apartment, and then bring them right inside. So took a nice W there. Very tired though, legs hurt. And with that said, please go get Brandin Cooks and T.J. Hockenson. So I'm Ian Hartitz. Thank you all for listening. Until next time, take care, everybody.